Hello, hello, my let's keep it real people. All right, it's been some time since we had anyone on talking about our brain. And trust me, Gary is not only going to talk to you about the brain, but man, oh man, his new book, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it is intriguing and fascinating, and how he came up with it, I have no idea. But before we find out any of that, because I know you have a lot of questions, let me tell you a little bit about Gary, which this is a real summary. I mean, he's got so much going on. He is the former chief of neurosurgery at Virginia Tech. So yes, he can talk about your brains. I mean, I was reading his little bio and then I was reading his big one, and it's just, oh my God. Where he currently teaches neuroscience to undergraduates and medical students. He has a special interest in burnout and building resilience, and in helping guide students into healthcare professions. I mean, Gary, you really narrowed it down from the big bio.
You asked for one or two sentences, I think.
You listen. How are you, Gary?
Well, it's a delight to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored.
Yes. And we're recording on pre-Thanksgiving Day. And Gary, you don't realize this, but do you know why really I'm going out tonight with my friends? You don't. My birthday is on Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Aha.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday. I always feel for people whose birthdays are on major holidays.
Oh, no, this is a good one, because when I went to the family events, people that normally as a kid, I grew up humble beginnings, didn't get a lot of gifts, but because I went to my aunt's house on Thanksgiving, they had to bring me a present. So it was good times.
It's pretty mandatory at that point.
I was like, it's my birthday. You got to bring me it. All right, before we get into it, Gary, one word, you get to pick one word to best describe your past 30 days, whatever the word that pops into your head, and then tell us why you picked that word.
I guess I would say joyful.
Oh.
We I mean it's life is busy, and a lot of running around, and we had some family challenges and family illnesses and that sort of thing leading up to the last month or two. But really, for the first time in a while, we stayed put where we live now in the mountains of North Carolina. And it's just been a glorious autumn here. I mean, every day gorgeous. The leaves this year were unbelievable. So, a lot of getting out into the fresh air and walking and picking up some sunshine. And so, yeah, I mean, couldn't be much better.
Yeah, I saw one of your hobbies is you love hiking with your wife and your dog, which was
That's right.
Border Collie. What's your dog's name?
The dog's name is Hamish, which is Scottish for James. Border Collies are Scottish dogs, at least, in their background. And I'm Scottish in my background. My mother was off the boat from Edinburgh.
All right. So do you and your wife hike every day you possibly can together, or do you ever do it alone just with you and your dog?
She's much tougher and stronger and more versatile than me. So she does go out hiking more than I do. The real hikes. I'll go on a 1 to 3 mile walk with her and the dog, but she has friends and they go really out into the mountains. But I ruined my knees through many years of soccer, and so they start to really complain on the real rugged trails. But yeah, so we do a little bit of mix, but we walk every day.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And here where we live right now, anywhere you turn, you have a view of mountains. It's just gorgeous.
All right, so I have to ask you, what do you do there for Thanksgiving?
Well, it depends on the timing. I think we're still I think we're still figuring out that it's not the pandemic anymore, and we're kind of surprised that we were going to actually do a dinner with some family. It's interesting. Throughout my career, I never took Thanksgiving off. I used to, because I was the boss in the last 20 years. I used to give everybody else off, and I would take Thanksgiving. So it was kind of interesting when we started having Thanksgivings, but then COVID hit, so we were doing that together. But this year, long story short, we one of the reasons why we moved down here is I have a son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter, so they're coming over with their dogs, and we live in a little cabin, so it will be chock full of beings.
Well, I'm sure the dog, I know my dog, I don't know what he is, but he has some border collie in him. When we go to my sister-in-law's house and they have a few dogs, you better protect your turkey, because they're
That's right.
right, and especially if the house is small. I just gonna say that to you.
One of my sons is one of those rescue greyhounds, and he's really tall, and he will graze the kitchen table if you're not careful. So
no, you don't stand a chance.
Right.
You better keep throwing treats, man. All right, we are going to talk about the brain. Hang in there, people. All right, so over and over again, when I was reaching out to my people before you came on, they asked this question in so many different ways. Okay, ask Gary, what is the latest on the development of how our brains work and is capable of learning and change? Because there's so much out there. And I feel like every day it's like, oh, we can do that. Oh, they found that out. Oh, please hook my brain up. I want to know more. So what is the biggest, latest? And I got it from several different people in so many different ways, as well as medical professionals from the everyday person. They want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how latest and greatest it is. I think it's the greatest. I think we've been aware of it for a long, long time. But it's funny when I talk to a lot of people, there's a misconception, I think, that goes on that our brains are like computers. Our lives nowadays are so computer oriented, so that I think we think our brains in terms of computers, where it's like, yeah, computers are complex wiring. You're wiring all sorts of stuff together, and it's done in a factory, and all these wires get put together, and somehow this comes out of it. Videos and AI and all that sort of stuff is able to come out of all this electronic wiring. But that with a computer, at least, that wiring gets set up, and that's pretty much it. That's the way it's going to be wired. When you need new capabilities, you got to add motherboards or whatever the heck they are.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people see our brains as such, is that, in the factory it gets made, and maybe there's some modifications in our early childhood, but eventually it's a system of wires with connections, and somehow it generates whatever we get out of our brains. But the reality is it is not that at all. It is, of course, set up in the factory, if you will, but it is forever changing. It is being modified nonstop every day. Every experience we have, everything that we think, every interface that we have is actually changing our brains on just multiple levels. We can really, dig into the weeds if we wanted to, but I mean, it gets all the way down to gene expression and the way the connections are made and whether connections are maintained or given up. Certain connections are strengthened, certain connections are weakened, and then in areas of the brain, certain areas of the brain are upregulated, so certain areas are downregulated. So the brain is morphing, it's changing all the time according to our experiences, for the better or the worse. There's no guarantee that it's going to be for the better, but
Yeah.
I think that we can shape it and we can push it towards the better side. And I think that is something that we all really need to be aware of, for, again, both sides, because we can pound it into submission, if you will, or we can lift it and improve its function and our happiness and our wellness through what we do, what we experience, and what we think, and kind of force ourselves to think, if you will. So it's a dynamic, forever changing, very malleable or very plastic system, not hardwired at all.
That is great news. That is great news. So I do some work with high-risk high school kids. I go in and teach different type of, more prevention programs with, they wanted to call it mental conditioning, mental strength, mental fitness. And they asked a few questions. And I said, you know what? I'm going to ask Gary. And these kids come from really rough, bad environments, a lot of trauma. They want to know. Now, most of them I work with, they were like juniors and seniors. They quote unquote, they said, are we screwed? Meaning, will they never get what happened to them out of their memory banks? Can they have hope to move beyond what they saw to live an amazing, great life? Because they're really scared and they hear so many conflicting stories.
Wow, what
a big question, right?
Yeah, it's a big and it's a very poignant question, but I think there is a lot of room for optimism. Can you eliminate negative episodes in your life, or even well beyond negative, but horrific episodes in your life? Can you eliminate those completely? Maybe not. Maybe we don't want to in some ways, but maybe not. But can we override them? Can we repave them? Can we actually grow from them? Potentially. I talked about my mother a little earlier, but she grew up with German bombs falling on her. She had a fiance killed in World War II, and went through tremendous stress, but came out of it a remarkably strong, remarkably brilliant woman. And so going back to what we started with on this, that how plastic, how malleable the brain is, it is altered for the negative with these high stress situations. Certain areas of the brain are down regulated, they literally shrink, and certain areas that are related to fight or flight and lack of trust and concern about upcoming stressors are strengthened, and they grow. For example, an area of the brain called the amygdala gets bigger. There are areas of the brain that are more tied into our reward systems that shrink, and areas in our brain even that are involved in high cognition, high thinking, that shrink if we're subjected to repeated stress. But they are not taken away. So if we can rechannel and emphasize the good that's in our lives and build upon that, we can reroute it again. We can strengthen the areas of our brain that are optimistic, that are looking forward, that are seeing the world in a more positive light, and we can downregulate the negative parts of our brain. It doesn't come overnight. You can't go to a lecture and hear somebody like me talk and say, oh, okay, that's it. I've had an epiphany. Everything is fine now. It takes practice. It takes repeated practice of going down better channels, if you will, to gradually retrain, reroute, and change our brains. But ultimately, the answer is yes. They are not stuck with this on their backs for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Will it go completely away? No. They'll remember components of it. But as time goes on, they will figure, how did I grow from this? How am I a better person? How am I going to change the world for the better after these negative experiences?
I heard one of my mentors said this to me years and years ago, and I never forgot it. And he went through some horrific things as a kid. And he said, Sandy, I don't want to forget it. It made me who I am today, the kind of person I want to be in the world, which is a very empathetic, compassionate human being. And he goes, if I didn't have that, I don't think I'd be who I am right now. But he did the same thing you're talking about. He took it, and not, as he would say, I didn't look at it as poor me or I was a victim. Took him years, but he looked at it, that was the life he was supposed to lead to get him where he is today. And that's a totally different spin.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we know that people can suffer, certainly from post-traumatic stress disorders, but there's also a component of post-traumatic growth. And I think that's what we want to shoot for. We want to take those experiences and come out of them better for them, or at least not taken down by them.
Yeah. I've never heard of that. It's called post-traumatic growth.
Right.
I'm like that, Gary.
And it would be the idea that, we can actually improve as persons despite the trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And learn the lesson, learn certain lessons from the trauma, and recognize that there's nothing great about going through terrible trauma, but you can still grow and ultimately overcome the trauma. And just the fact of overcoming the trauma should be something we celebrate, should be something that we congratulate ourselves for.
That's a great way of looking at it. All right. So what was the final point that you were like, yep, I'm going to retire. That's it. I'm going to start my next journey.
Well, that one was easy.
That was easy?
Well, it was actually hyper complex, but it was easy in some ways. I loved being a neurosurgeon. I loved operating. I probably did twice the amount of operations as the average neurosurgeon. Was always hungry for more. But about, I don't know, 30 years ago, I had a neurological illness myself, something called ADEM, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, but it kind of wiped me out. It's like having MS, but all at once.
Whoa.
Multiple sclerosis all at once. Your body attacks the insulation of your nerves. But I was able to recover, but there was maybe a minor, I could notice things about my nervous system that wasn't perfect afterwards. But as the years went on, and particularly when I was tired, I would notice certain symptoms coming out, and they started getting worse. And a few years ago, I started noticing in the middle of operations, I might start getting some double vision, or my hands would go numb. And you can't do that. You can't practice brain surgery when you're not seeing straight or feeling straight.
Yeah.
So as that side of it was pretty easy, and I said, no, I'm just not gonna. I'm not gonna try to force this. I don't need to do it forever. There are some people who just can't release the scalpel, but I found that it was relatively easy. And I had neglected my wife for, I don't know, only about 40 years. So I thought, I do not want to be one of these guys who clings to the operating table until they fall into a wheelchair and then turn to his wife and says, all right, honey, time to take care of me.
Oh my God. 40 years. She's very understanding.
Everybody calls my wife a saint for a number of reasons. So.
Yeah, I'm sure she's awesome.
She is. She's a Jersey girl too.
Is she?
Yep.
Oh
yep.
my God. Okay, so.
Frenchtown, by the way. She was from Frenchtown.
Oh, I like Frenchtown.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something that I've thought about for, I don't even know, the past 40 years, because I have a lot of friends that are surgeons. But I just want to say, I'm so in awe that you would be able to do that and help that many people and not be scared of the outcome. And I mean, like, I think it's so heroic that you're in there saving so many lives. And how do you do that and not freak out? Like, it just boggles my brain, especially now. I love them, very, maybe they don't like humans that much type of surgeons that I know. And, you couldn't have a great conversation with them, but they're still great surgeons. But you seem to be very compassionate, empathetic, kind, love people. I mean, I'm reading what you said, about humans. How do you not freak out when you go in there? Like, because things can, you can't save everyone, I'm assuming.
Oh, you're assuming very, very well.
I mean, I don't want to assume, but I didn't think it's 100 to 100,
My field particularly is a field of bad outcomes.
Yes, yes.
There's very few brain tumors that we actually cure. There's very few big hemorrhages in the brain that we are going to make the people better, or severe head injuries, or spines that are crushing the spinal cord. There's a lot of bad outcomes, and we certainly, at times contribute to the bad outcomes. So, in my interest in the world of burnout, I very much focused a lot on how do you, overcome all these bad outcomes, and particularly when you contribute to them. But there's a flip side to it too. I think, you were talking about kind of making us sound heroic. I think the real heroes, for me, at least throughout my career, were the patients and their families. Every day throughout my career, it never ceased to astound me, the responses of the patients themselves and their families. A lot of times the poor patients weren't even capable of, they were in coma or something.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with the families. But I throughout the years, just the sheer amount of bravery I witnessed. And the only word I've ever been able to come up with that aptly describes it is grace. Grace under fire. I mean, under the worst circumstances of their lives, to be full of grace, to be thankful, to be focused in, to be caring. I've got these boxes full of thank you cards from families of people whose loved ones died, and they have the grace to thank me. And so I think, to answer your question, what happens is, if you can be inspired by this and see them as the real heroes, it just makes it easy, because all you're going to do is your best. You're just going to go in and do your very best for them. And that's kind of how we tackled it. Each one, each case at a time, throwing everything you had at it.
Gary, I hear you, and I agree with you. I find humans to be, I just love them. I mean, they're incredible. I find them to be filled with grace and courage. I mean, the things that they go through and come out the other side, it just blows my mind. But still in awe. What do you do? Like, when you see this beautiful, loving family and it didn't work out the way, of course they want to do, like you said, you're doing your best. How do you cope with that? Like, what do you do? When you talk a lot about not burning out and self-care, like, because that still has to weigh on you.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. In the novel, as a matter of fact, there's a whole section on this, where the surgeon talks about when he when his mistakes harm people. And he talks about how the fact that it is very hard to get out of your mind. It just keeps going and going
Yeah,
in cycles in your mind. And particularly because you're seeing the patient every day for quite a while, and it's painful. To the point where it can become, kind of pathological, where you don't want to see the patient, where it
absolutely.
causes you a lot of pain and discomfort. And in the book we talk about, he talks about the fact that the only time it eventually goes is if the patient leaves or dies, or another major catastrophe comes in. Well, hopefully we figure out how to deal with that better. And some of the ways is to always be focused on what can we do better next time. Are there things that we can change and help the patients more? It's also to help the patient as much as you can after the bad event, or if it's clearly not going to go well. There was an interesting vignette on this when we would do resilience building sessions with our team, and we talked about giving very bad news to families, and the toll that takes. And one of the team spoke up and said, "This is going to sound really bizarre, but sometimes I get those warm and tingly feelings when I break very bad news." And the rest of the team started going, "Yeah, something, you're right. Sometimes it actually feels good," may not be the right word, but there's some sort of positivity coming out of it. And what we were able to derive from this is that there are many situations where we actually can't physically make better. My surgery is not going to change things, but we still may be able to help alleviate the suffering of the family, just by giving them comfort and consolation, and to educate them as best we can, and to alleviate guilt. So there are many ways that we may be able to help with their suffering, even if we're not helping the overall situation. And we recognize that, hey, that's part of being a doctor. In fact, that's probably the central part of being a doctor, is to attack the suffering and help people with their suffering. So, to focus on the good rather than the
Yeah,
bad goes a
yeah,
long way. And
yeah.
then sometimes you just have to go with overt distraction, is just say, I've beaten myself enough up about this. I'm not doing anybody any good by wallowing in it. I go play with my kids, or go for a long walk, or listen to music, or I don't know if you can see in the background, but I play the banjo and the guitar, and
Yeah.
just to sit and play for a while was always a decent escape for me. So yeah, many different ways to attack it, and everybody's going to need different methodologies.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and I did see that you have a lot of hobbies, which is great. I mean, you do a lot of different things, like, and you're going to take up the bagpipes in 2024. So you weren't, which was, I'm sure, great, that you weren't just coming home and had no other interest. You had a lot of other interest going on, which brings me, I want to talk about the book because it's fascinating to me. But before we do that, real quick, why did you pick this specific area?
Neurosurgery, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's a it's a story I often tell as a warning to medical students, actually. So a lot of medical students, and I was one of them, go through multiple incantations of what they're going to be. So I started out as a family doc, and then I was going to be a cancer doc, and then I was going to be a general surgeon, and I finally decided on being a cardiothoracic surgeon, and had it all set up. I had my residency all set up, and that sort of thing. And in the last month of medical school, I saw my first brain operation, and I said, "Oh my God, I have got to do that. That is just too
Oh,
cool." Now, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, which was a lot. It was a grueling training process, and it was a grueling career. But it worked out really well for me, because I can't imagine doing anything else now. But I always tell the med students, listen, I still believe very much in following your heart. If you get too analytic about it,
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
end up not being very happy. But follow your heart, but do some research up front so you at least know what you're getting yourself into.
Don't just pick it because it looks really cool. Like,
It looked cool.
yeah. Hey, I like that. That brain looks awesome. All right. So I just want you to know that I've gone to a lot of book workshops with fictional authors, and I'm a nonfiction writer. And many of them have told me it's based loosely on a lot of truth. And they were just protecting the innocent, but it had a lot to do with their lives. So, Death's Pale Flag, is it got a lot behind the scenes about you and your life?
Yeah. Well, I'm accused of that by many who know me and who have read it. So I guess so.
I guess you're, a neurosurgeon, so that goes without saying.
It started as I've only ever written nonfiction before too. As a matter of
Yeah, I
fact,
saw that.
that's all our world is, right? Is nonfiction. So I really wanted to kind of give people a behind the scenes look at what really it's like to be in neurosurgery, to see what happens to the patients, how they got there, what the operations look and feel like. And I had put together a bunch of snippets through the years, as I was living through them. And then as I started putting it together, I was like, this is boring. Oh my God, this is boring. And I thought, it'd be
I don't
much
even
more
want to read it. Boring.
Well, I wanted to be, and so I thought, well, what if it was fictional? Maybe it would be much more immersive. Maybe it would put the reader right there in the OR, with the blood running down the drapes and having to figure out what to do. And so I had to come up with a fictional contrivance, because I will tell you, all the neurosurgery in it is very real, very actual, not necessarily one-to-one representations of what I saw, but amalgams. And so the neurosurgery is very true to form. Some people have, often asked me, oh, is this hyperbole? And I'm like, nope, that's exactly what it was like. But the fictional tale weaved through it obviously is definitely fiction, and hopefully fun and hopefully interesting.
Sorry.
Originally, it was going to be totally different. The neurosurgeon was going to be at Walter Reed and start getting a bunch of high level government people who were all having the same problem, ruptured aneurysms, and he figures out that they're being poisoned somehow, and meets a beautiful blonde FBI agent, and it just got too lame. So I completely switched horses in midstream on that one.
Well, I think we could tell them a little more about the book, because I did read a lot on the Amazon site. So can we mention the ghost?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
sure.
So I just want you to know, it is creeping me out just a little that it takes place in Pennsylvania, and also it has to do with Jeep, because that's all I drive is Jeeps.
Me too.
Oh, oh, there you go. So give them a little bit about the book. I can't wait. Oh my God. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's about a brain surgeon. By the way, my next book has nothing to do with anything like that, but it has to do with a brain surgeon who is definitely on the workaholic side of things, and definitely burned out to one degree or another. But theoretically living an idealized life with a lovely wife and kids and all that sort of stuff. But he begins to see people that shouldn't be there in various settings, which get hopefully scarier and scarier. And initially, he convinces himself that it must be hallucinations, maybe related to all the sleep deprivation he goes through from being on call a lot. or maybe seizures or something, but he gets it looked
Yeah.
at. And as they get scarier and a little more bizarre, he begins to convince himself that they're actually ghosts. And the sightings escalate and escalate till it reach, and it really makes him come off the rails. You know, he starts becoming unglued both at work and with his family. And so hopefully for the readers, they're trying to figure out, is he crazy, or are these
Yeah.
ghosts
Yeah.
real?
Yeah.
And one of the other things I wanted to do with it was to ask the readers, what's actually scarier, the supernatural world or the natural world he's inhabiting?
Ooh.
So I thought that, you know, those would be fun things to tangle with for the readers. And, you know, it comes to a head, but I won't give away, you know, what happens.
No, 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 no. Because I did have people, I sent them the synopsis about the book. They were like, well, you think it is really true? Do you think he really saw ghosts? I said, I don't know. I don't know, because some of them really do believe in ghosts. And they're like, I'm like, you have to read the book. What do I know? We won't tell them. All right. So you said you have other books coming up already, or they're in the works? What do you got going on, Gary?
Yeah, I've got there's probably 3 in the works, but one is, I am not a good writer, you know,
Wait,
and
stop it. Like, what do you mean? You
well,
can't say that.
I'm a rank amateur at it, right? So I tend to, the words just kind of spill out onto the page, but boy, do I have to do a lot of rewrites to get it, you
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah,
somewhat
yeah, yeah.
manageable. And so I have a book that has been rewritten probably about 10 times, and I'm still in the rewriting process. And that one is actually a YA book, about a, you know, kind of a coming of age story about a soccer player.
Hmm.
And hopefully will be fun for people to read. So that's the one that's closest. Then I love the town I'm in right now, so I'm working on a, if you will, a cozy murder mystery,
Hmm.
for the fun of that. And then of course everybody has to have a post-apocalyptic book, and I have one of those kind of in the works.
Okay, so for
So
my,
all over the place.
all right, so I have a lot of writers in the audience. How do you break this down? Okay, so you have 3 things in your head. And you said you're not a great writer. You do a lot of rewrites. Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of writers rewrite. It's not just like, oh, it's beautiful. And I'm in a lot of different writing groups, and I'm definitely not, I mean, I'm rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. How do you manage your time to be, okay, this is how much I'm allotting for writing, and now you got 3 books going on? Or do you just go, oh, I'm inspired, let's go that way?
Yeah, I don't know if there is an easy answer on this one. I am forever running out of time, which
Ah,
I guess is a good thing.
you won't be bored. You won't ever be bored.
I am not bored at all. And like these my instruments there on the walls are gathering some dust. I go into withdrawal with stuff like that. I want to get
Mm.
back to them. But yeah, I tend to be one of these people who, when I start, the time just evaporates, you know, and I'll realize I've been sitting there for 5 straight hours. And that's not good for us, you know, at least physically, but mentally, obviously, I think it's very good for us. And as I said, the words just kind of pour out on the page, but I'm lucky compared to a lot of writers, I think, that I've spoken with. I enjoy the rewrites. I actually really enjoy rewriting. How about you? I mean, so it's easy for me because I like it. Do you like rewriting?
Um, I probably do it different than you. I don't write on the computer. I have to handwrite everything and then enter it, because it really helps me create. And I do a lot of what I call scribble scrabble. So I like it because I have color codes. Here's the brainiac science part of it, you know what I mean? And then here's the fun part of it. Here's the mental, like, so I do things in different color codes. And so I actually enjoy it, because my thing is not, my forte is not saying it in 2 sentences. Like, here, give me your bio in 2 sentences. I tend to go on and on, which probably, for 3 pages, that could be 2 sentences.
Sandy, Death's Pale Flag initially was 250,000 words. So I call it verbal dysentery. I mean, as I
Yeah,
said,
that's me. I just go blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, whoa, I kept repeating myself. That could be 2 sentences. Okay. Yeah.
So
It's
it's
fun. I
really
do like
important.
it. I do like it. But
Good.
again, I'm making it, it's purple, it's blue. I have pages all over and books and scribble scrabble and big charts. So I figured out a way to make it fun for me, to make it work for me. Because that's the way my brain works.
And if you can do that, I mean, I think it just changes the whole experience. Whereas I do know a lot of people who write who are just, it's agony when they go into the rewrites.
Oh,
And that's a foreign experience to me. I hope that never hits me.
yeah. Well, those people who, they should come to me. I'll make it more fun for them. There's always a workaround. Oh, Gary, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have so many questions for you that I could go down a certain path, but we don't have time. Like you said, we could get in the weeds, but we're running out of time. I'm writing all these different questions I have for you that are just fascinating to me that I can apply even to my own life. So I know all my listeners or viewers too, they work in all different aspects of their life. And it's not just what they could apply to themselves, but also the people they work with. So I really appreciate taking the time to do this. I really do.
We can do a lightning round if you want.
Well, I have some fun questions for you. Are you ready for that?
Whatever you got.
Yeah, these are just lighthearted questions, meaning okay, what's your favorite food? And don't say broccoli. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, it's got to be pizza, right?
I mean, it is the number one.
It's a good Jersey pizza too. I mean,
oh my God.
I want a real Jersey pizza.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. And New York. Favorite color?
Oh my goodness. I guess it's green. It's my college color and it's been everywhere.
One of the favorite books you're reading now that's not your own?
I'm actually reading a book. I read a lot of nonfiction. So but I'm reading a book on the life and times of Norman Rockwell. And it's pretty interesting. A lot of stuff I didn't know about him. So because I really have enjoyed his artwork through the years.
What is the most fascinating thing that you learned from your students in the last month?
How to avoid work? No, from the students, there's been a really, this one's actually kind of fascinating. It's worth a minute or two.
I'm ready.
Here I am, completely immersed in the world of neuroscience for my entire adult life. And I learned something that I never knew before. I assumed that everybody on Earth processed their thoughts, their thinking the same way that I do, which in my case, there's a voice, there's a monologue going on in my head almost nonstop. If I shut up, it'll start talking to me. It's in my voice. It's somehow in my voice. It can be kind of critical, both of me and other situations. But it really is there nonstop. And what I learned recently is not everybody experiences the world that way or experiences their thoughts that way. And the more I sample more people, the more I realize that how diverse it is. Some people don't hear words at all. Some people see words. Some people it's not words at all. Sometimes it's like images or symbols or emotions or feelings. It's really fascinating when you start digging into it. And the level of research about it is somewhat limited. But it's crazy. I don't know about, so what about you? What goes on in your head?
Yeah, Gary, I don't hear my voice in my head talking, but a lot of my thoughts and beliefs, I believe I'm getting messages from the universe, some higher power. I get a lot of ongoing, yeah, do this, go this way. But I take a lot of time to spend with myself to listen to what's really going on. You know what I mean? With me. So it's not
Sure.
in my voice, but I still feel like I get really strong messages.
But is that in the form of words or is it more feelings?
More feelings.
Yeah, see, I mean, that's totally different from me.
Yeah.
Everything in my world is auditory. It is just, I am hearing this going. Another person told me, for example, that they have words too, a monologue that goes on, but theirs is in the voice of a childhood friend, an imaginary childhood friend. I mean,
That's awesome.
it's wild, isn't it? And I never realized that because, and it makes sense going back to what we were saying, how all our brains are actually different because we go through all sorts of different
Yeah.
experiences. And so, why should I expect it to be the same? But it really is important, I think, when we start thinking about how we deal with other people, because I think we often assume we know what they're thinking, we know what they're feeling. And we're like,
Yeah.
the reality is we don't have a clue how they're thinking or feeling, and so it's important that we don't start telling ourselves stories about how they're experiencing the world and the reasons behind their actions and their emotions and all, because we're not experiencing the world the same way as they are. So we can't be constantly, constructing this story around them. The best thing to do is probably to ask.
I would love to study anything on that subject because I am so fascinated with, for me personally, my message has always been, everyone's brains work differently. And I'm not coming from the scientific end of it, but we work differently. How we see the world is different. Our experiences are different. And your unique brain is awesome and incredible. And for me, I focus on the strengths, what you can do and what you can't. And I do a lot of work with neurodiverse kids. So I'm always saying, we can spend all day thinking about the things you can't, but let's, really think, oh, I can't do this, but look, wow, I can do this. And the reason I got fascinated with, for many reasons, but my son, not till 16, Gary, did he get diagnosed to be on the autism spectrum. They just knew, okay, he had an issue with the focus, but he got through because he tested well. He really was a great tester. And everything he learns, if you tell him, he can remember it. But when he would go to put paper to pen, it didn't process right. And finally, someone said, I think he should be tested for the autism spectrum. And within 2 seconds, they were like, oh my God, how did this get missed? As sophomore year, and we have no clue. Well, I'll never forget. Now, this is, he was 17, so 3 years ago. He's bouncing on the trampoline and he goes, he hadn't been told yet that he was on the autism spectrum because the therapist's like, we don't know what to do. I mean, he's iffy. Like, you may not know, you just might think he's shot. Like, how's it going to affect, him? And they were going back and forth. And he's jumping on the trampoline, Gary, and he says, Mom, was I ever tested for autism? That time that we went, I don't know, there was a window, like, was that for autism? And I said, yeah, why you ask? Because, I've been doing research and meeting other friends on the spectrum, and it just makes sense to me. And he goes, why didn't you say anything? I said, Cole, we just weren't sure what to do yet. Mr. John, his therapist, we're going back and forth. And he said, well, I'm glad I know. Now I understand the way I work. But he said, and then he goes, Mom, I know you. Don't you dare shed a tear for me. Don't you dare feel bad for me. Don't you dare cry for me. I love my brain. I wouldn't want anybody else's brain. I love the way it works. I know what I can't, what I'm going to have a tough time this way, but man, what I can do is magnificent. I'm like bawling for different reasons.
Yeah, of course.
And I was just like, oh my God. And I'm like, Cole goes, no, mom. I mean, what I can do, and I'm going to spread it to every kid I know and whoever I know, it's magnificent. Now, I know I have some real struggles, and he does. He's at Tyler Art now. But man, it really put me on a mission ever since that day to do anything I can to help kids embrace their unique brain. So when you're talking about that we process, thinking different, I never heard of that. I would love to tell these kids and get more research so we can chat about that. It would be amazing to me.
Yeah, it's crazy how it evaded me all these years. But you raise another, I think, absolutely critical point in when we're dealing with burnout and trying to promote resilience and wellness. The very first step that we believe in taking is what we would call self-compassion, or building our personal emotional intelligence. And that is, we're in the society where everything's moving a mile a minute. We're bombarded all the time. Our focus is almost always external on something. And I think really to be able to help ourselves, we have to know ourselves. We have to really spend some time getting to appreciate and understand how we do function. How do we function in our environment? What's going on in our heads? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What raise us up? What build us up? What tear us down? Because how do we address it if we don't understand it ourselves?
Yeah. Without judgment. That's the big thing.
And you got to do it without judgment. And the other thing that you got to do it without, which is really common, is guilt. Oh, I'm going to take some time and focus on myself. Oh no, that's what a narcissist does. No, in this case, it is not being a narcissist. It's trying to, be a better person.
Yeah. Oh, Gary, we'll have to stay connected, but we have to go. My Let's Keep It Real people. This was awesome, wasn't it? Gary and I would really appreciate you sharing, liking, and rating it. You can listen and watch wherever you want to. It's everywhere. But before we go, Gary, how can they find you and how can they find your book?
The easiest thing is I do have a website. It's just my name, Gary R. Simonds, SIMONDS.com. So that one's pretty easy, GaryRSimonds.com. And I love connecting with people and discussing all this stuff. And so there are multiple ways to connect me. All the connections to buy the books are there too, if they wish. And I very much look forward to talking to people.
Cool. All right. You know what I'm going to say. Until next time. Toodles. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.